Well, welcome one and all to another episode of Solutionaries, where we like to interview and talk with various solutionaries from really around the United States and around the world, people who are doing amazing work in the regenerative field. And that can be anything from soil and water and agriculture to green technology, the green economy, and beyond. So I'm really happy here today. It's a snowy day here in Crestone, Colorado, and I'm really happy to kind of circle back around to start this interview with actually two people today, but to start it with Rachel Linden, who I've known for over 10 years. Rachel Linden, who is the executive director of Green Lifestyles Network. I met years ago when we were working on the Sacramento River watershed project in the Bay Area of California, bringing more awareness around water issues like privatization, water toxicity, and really the overuse of water throughout Central Valley and a lot of the agriculture there, and trying to get people to become not only more aware, but to become an active stakeholder in kind of changing the old paradigm. So we're going to start today, and then we're going to pivot over to Richard A. McCoy, and he's doing amazing work in New Jersey, which also has coast to coast potential impact and really global impact. He's really at the cutting edge of regenerative land management. But we're going to start today. We're going to go all the way down to Texas, probably a little warmer and probably not snowing like here in Colorado Rockies. But I'd like to welcome Rachel Linden, again, Executive Director of Green Lifestyles Network. So welcome, Rachel.
Hi, Michael. Nice to see you again. It's been a minute. Yeah, we're streaming from my homestead in Austin, Texas, which is about 7 hours south of our farm in Northeast Texas, where we host honeybees and we generate animal feed. And that's a newer project for us. We are based out of California. We are a 501(c)(3), and we have for many years been a party to organic land care management. And I was associated with a national nonprofit for many years where we advocated for organic land care standards in municipal spaces. So not on farms, but on the other land, all the parks and playgrounds and school grounds and right of ways and HOAs and places that we pay taxes to have our government manage. And I did that for years and started getting into the awareness of how toxic pesticides are, which led me to working with scientists all over the United States and actually all over the world. And I don't think I even have to go into, just to jump right into the topic, I don't think I even have to tell people anymore how toxic pesticides are. We're all generally aware that pesticides are bad in that they're killing. They kill pests, but unfortunately they don't stop at pests. They can kill ecosystems and waterways, and they are toxic to mammals and aquatic life and
Yeah.
songbirds and bees. Everybody gets that. I don't have to really tell
And,
people that.
yeah, and of course, a lot of us are familiar with Roundup and the impacts of glyphosate. And when we started the Sacramento River Watershed Project, we were working particularly in between the coastal range and the Sierra Nevadas in Nevada County, because the 400 and some odd miles of irrigation ditches from the gold mining legacy, not only were they using Roundup for, again, pesticide weed abatement along the irrigation ditches, which fed water throughout the system, but they were also using things like cutrine and heavy metal based algicides. And of course, as we followed the waterways, the tributaries and the distributaries, we found out that it poured right into the Feather River, the Sacramento River, and of course, the Sacramento River watershed, which is thousands of miles of waterways, and really the impact that had all across California. And it's at that time I got to know people that you were connected to from non-toxic communities, also up in Oregon, Beyond Toxics, and of course, Zen Honeycutt and Moms Across America. And it was around the same time as the major lawsuit against Monsanto that happened there in Vallejo. So we kind of fast tracked, both of us, kind of following the connectivity there through water and the work that you were doing with Green Lifestyles Network and at that time with Earthstock Foundation. So what are you doing these days? You're on your farm, and I know you have a lot of dynamic projects, and we're going to segue into meeting Richard here in a moment. But you had mentioned a little bit about the difference between regenerative land care and organic land care. And I thought it was fascinating if you could talk for a minute about the difference between agriculture and, like you said, public use land and the impact of things like people don't think about, like grass.
Yeah. So when I ask this question, almost nobody can answer it. It's a stumper for most people, and I actually have to give them the punchline because they can't fathom this being the answer. But when I ask people what's the number one by volume crop being grown in the United States, most of us think, oh, well, that's got to be, soybeans or corn or cotton or some. No, it's none of those things. In fact, the top two and or three, arguably added together, are not the number one crop by volume being grown in the United States. That's turf grass. That is grass being grown. And we're not even talking about farms. We're talking about parks, playgrounds. Yes, we're talking about lawns. That's a lot of turf grass. But the reality is, you need to make a few distinctions. Farms are here, they represent this much land. Public spaces are over here, it represents this much land. And private space is here, and it represents this much land. Now, can I do something about someone else's land? Not really. I can ask them nicely, can you stop using these pesticides and incorporate these better practices that are non-toxic? But the reality is I can't tell them what to do. And nobody wants to be told what to do. I can't tell a farmer, I can't tell a homeowner, but I can tell a municipality. I can tell my government officials that represent me, I want these lands that you are paid to manage on my behalf managed in a non-toxic manner using organic land care standards. And we did that for many years. We had marginal success at best. And I don't mean that we weren't busy telling people or convincing people this was the right thing to do. There were a lot of excuses at the local level to change. There's a lot of, people that don't want to change, don't can't change for whatever reasons. And we realized that the organic land care standards were a great idea. It was missing some aspects, which I'm hoping regenerative land care are going to cover. So the combination of the two of those together create a system that manages the invasive species, manages the costs, gives a starting point, gives a set of goals, gives a set of preferred, allowed, and prohibited practices, preferred, allowed, and prohibited products, and gives us a system by which the land can be managed where everybody knows what we're talking about. We're all on the same page. So in doing this, convincing a municipality, town by town or township by township or borough by borough to make change happen is about the slow road, a slow road to nowhere real quick. So what we need, in my opinion, and this is after talking to scientists all around the country, is we've got a Clean Water Act, we've got a Clean Air Act, but we don't have a Clean Soils Act, or a better way to look at it might be a Safe and Healthy Soils Act. If we had that and we incorporated organic land care standards and regenerative land care standards into a system that's regionally adapted across our country, we could easily adapt these land care practices in such a way as to mitigate synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, fungicides, biocides, and take back our parks, playgrounds, right-of-ways, schoolyards, all the off-target places that are being bombarded by these toxic inputs, and bring them back to how we used to manage these places effectively and beautifully that don't require toxic, expensive inputs.
Right.
So
And not to
that's where I'm
mention,
coming from.
the devastating impact that they have on pollinators, which are a huge link to our food security, which actually will parlay perfectly to really our featured guest, which you introduced me to recently. He's an amazing solutionary. I do also want to mention going back to a couple of years ago, Mike Lewis Synergy Ag, when you were involved in soil remediation after the Lahaina fire there. So again, there's many aspects to soil, as a lot of people know. But let's kind of cut to the chase now. He's taken some time to be with us today, all the way from the Garden State of New Jersey, appropriately named in his work. But I'd like to welcome Richard A. McCoy from Regenerative Land Consultant LLC to share a little bit about his incredible work, not only with education and curriculums, but also he's a real hands-on solutionary doing stuff throughout his region. So welcome, Richard.
Hi, Michael. Rachel, nice to be here. Thank you. Yeah, so just to it's the currently it's Richard A. McCoy Regenerative Land Care Consulting LLC, which is now I'm exiting my company of 27 years, Richard A. McCoy Horticultural Services Incorporated. So what I did with my landscape company, essentially it started as a conventional landscape company. We're using synthetic chemicals, planting invasive species, doing all the things that you're not supposed to do that we realize are not fantastic for the environment at this point. In 2005, it was suggested to me that I begin to start to do things organically. And like most of the landscape industry, I resisted it first. And, I thought it's going to be too expensive. It's never going to work. So I wasn't going to do it. And then what happened in 2000, just around the end of 2005, 2006, I went to an organic land care course by a group from Connecticut, NOFA, the Northeastern Organic Farming Association. And they started talking about all these crazy things that live in the soil under your feet that I had no idea existed, that in all my work up until that point, I have been doing detrimental practices to, we would put compost and we would put manures down, but we did it because, well, that's what you were supposed to do. We didn't actually know why we were doing it until I went to this course and realized it's because of all the biology in the soil. That started a flywheel that led to native species, green infrastructure. Then in 2017, what we finally did was we had incorporated electric equipment, built a 1.8 kilowatt solar trailer, and started running all electric equipment out of a trailer, which actually worked pretty nicely. And in that time, what I realized was as I was doing things organically, and this is where the term regenerative falls into place. Both regenerative and organic both have roots in soil, and they both have a deep history. This is nothing new. This goes back to the 1800s with Sir Albert Howard and Lady Eve Balfour when they started talking about soil. Then you fast forward to Silent Spring and Rachel Carson when she started talking about pesticides and the detrimental aspects of pesticides on the environment and human health. All those things sort of come into play, and you think about where I started when I was out, as an arborist. When I first started in 1990 in the industry, I was spraying tree canopies, with 1,000-gallon spray rig out, just blanketing properties. And my job card actually read, go out and spray the tree canopy for leaf chewing and sucking insects. So basically I was out killing everything. Fast forward again, now realizing that the organic system and regenerative system both have roots, no pun intended, in soil. I started to build from there, and that's where the idea of regenerative falls into place. And for me, what regenerative is, where the difference between organic and regenerative, organic stops, in my viewpoint, where with inputs to the system, right? Because you can spray something organically, you can organically build soil with cover crops and green manures and things like that. You can use green mulches. That all builds organic matter in the soil, which is the everything that we try to work from. Where I think that system is flawed a little bit, and where regenerative comes in, is it sort of stops at that point with organic to me. And then you start talking about how ecology and how the native species interact and how human interaction works with those native plant species. And the one thing that we've forgotten through all of this is the human interaction that we've lost throughout history. And we look at landscapes through a glass window as it is a picture on the wall. We don't think about ecology. We look at it just as, a landscape is something to look at. And that's where, regenerative is soil first, water second, for me anyway. Then it's biodiversity and and community, because without those four interlocking pillars, then you sort of lose track of where everything goes. And that to me is where the education can fall into place based on regenerative land care, because you can teach those four sort of pillars based on a foundation of what I call living systems web, which is everything is connected. So again, soil is connected to water, water is connected to biodiversity, and biodiversity connected to community. And that is sort of where I have gotten to this point. Like I mentioned, I'm exiting my business, my landscape business of 27 years. That has been regenerative essentially since 2005, and where I'm at now, which is developing education programs and working with HOAs and contractors, trying to have them do things in a regenerative fashion.
Great. Why don't we bring Rachel into the call and she can share a little bit about what you're talking about.
Sure. So Richard and I met a few years ago when I lived on the East Coast, and actually, I got to say, I looked forward to meeting you and seeing your work because I had heard about you before I ever met you. And I was like, wait a minute, there's a guy who's taking the organic land care standards and who's actually implementing them right now. And he's making a living doing it, and he's making a killing doing it. I love it. So, and when I met you, I was even more impressed because you knew your stuff and you were true to it. You weren't greenwashing, and that was pretty rare. So I'm just going to say more power to you, man. You made it work. You did it. And you did it beautifully too. So I had heard about you, your reputation preceded you, and I think we kind of both came to the same conclusions. Organic land care standards, which are a real standard, they're a thing people don't know about. So let me give one like quick shout out to them. NOFA started that decades ago with a grant from the USDA to create a standard for landscapes and land care that is not for farming. So we're not talking about farming. We're talking about lawns, right of ways. We're talking about other spaces, sports fields, other than farms. So just so the public understands, because sometimes it takes them a minute to go, oh, wait a minute, we're not talking about farms. Yeah, we're not talking about farms. We're talking about the other land, which is a lot of land. And how do we manage that? Yeah, and it's often very toxically, people have no idea how bad it is. In fact, I can go into a municipality, and I know you'll say this too, Richard. If I go into a city and I ask the mayor, I go, mayor or city council person, are you using anything toxic on your in your parks or on the playgrounds? They will say, of course not. We would never use anything toxic. And then I'll come in and go, hold on. I pulled a FOIA. Here's 30, 40 pages of information. You are definitely using toxic substances. Don't take my word for it. Here's safety data sheets from the products themselves. They will tell you what the side effects are. And all of these things that you're trying to fix in the waterways, algae blooms and toxic die-off scenarios, off target, pollinator deaths, bird deaths, animal problems, they are the exact side effects, endocrine disruption, hormone disruption, on the safety data sheets for the products you're already using. How would you like to not have those problems? How would you like to never have those problems again by stopping the problem? Stop paying to have this expensive problem over here. And the next thing we found was once we started talking to them about the liability factor, they started to hear us. I could bring in a folder, and our folder went from being this high to a folder that we couldn't carry anymore and we couldn't afford to print. And what that folder file was a notebook of hundreds and hundreds of studies showing how toxic pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, biocides are. People have no idea. They think, oh, because it wasn't that long ago, Richard, you'll appreciate this. And Michael, I think you'll remember it too. The manufacturers for some of the most toxic pesticide products would have told you and said on camera, our products are safe enough to drink. They're not. They're so not safe. There are class action lawsuits, and they aren't even for ingesting. They're for getting it on your skin. You can get cancer. You can have lifelong problems, health issues, terminal problems because you're exposed. The bellwether client in the mega lawsuit in California against what started out as Monsanto and then became Bayer because they got bought out during the lawsuit, that was $11 billion payout. And that guy, the bellwether client, which is the first guy, Lee Johnson, he only got touched with the product twice. And he's dying of a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's terminal. It's really bad.
So,
And
so,
yeah,
so I have a question, just for people who are watching this who might not be familiar with some of these terms. Um, Richard had mentioned that he used to be a horticulturalist. I want to dive into words like horticulture, permaculture, what they are, and also I wanted to get a little more understanding about how Richard may or may not work with the idea of remediation of soil when he comes in and begins a project. So just to share a little more awareness for those who might be watching this broadcast.
Sure. So horticulture, I guess you can, if you wanted to try to draw a line between horticulture and sort of, I guess, organic or regenerative. Horticulture is really a more formal. This is where it gets tricky. I really don't have. It's very difficult because horticulture is part of gardening, and if you sort of look at it from horticulture being a formal way of maintaining gardens, then that gives the native plant aspect of it sort of a bad rap because you can integrate both.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe horticultural is more along the lines of applications because again, when you go back to thinking about organics, you can apply organic pesticides, but horticulture typically is using synthetic chemicals, fertilizers, and pesticides. I think maybe that's where you can draw a line there. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to. We're trying to educate people that native plant species can be there can be a formality to it, and those cues for care are important to realize when you design with native plants that you design with intention, so that it looks like it can be formal, it can be nice and neat. So that 70-year-old mindset that people have of a landscape being weed free, pest free, leaf free can be done in an organized, native, organic or regenerative fashion. So I think probably the dividing line would be probably synthetic chemicals versus non-synthetic chemicals, because even in a sustainably designed landscape, you can have formal hedges. So it can't be, the formality of a say a boxwood or a Texas yew hedge, because you can incorporate all those aspects into your design. It's just a matter of, I think, probably the applications of materials is probably where the main dividing line is for that. If that makes sense.
So, yeah, absolutely. So in regenerative land consulting, do you work with principles of permaculture? Because I know a lot when I took my permaculture design course, we learned how certain plants provide shade to other plants. Certain plants will support the kind of the mycelial network and help bring nitrogen into a system and all these things. Is that something that is one of the tools in the regenerative land consulting work that you do?
Yeah, completely. It's so really the regenerative aspect again of is it that we're pulling in all different pieces of any type of land care, right? And this is also maybe a distinction too between landscaping and land care. If somebody's landscaping, to me, that's more of the past tense, like landscaping is synthetic chemicals, non-native species. Doesn't mean you don't care. It just means you don't recognize the natural systems that are in place that land care does. So when you're landscaping, it's really that dominant sort of aspect of taking out all the good topsoil and bringing new grass in and new hedges and all those kinds of things, where the regenerative aspect and permaculture and things like that is where you're working with the natural landscape without having to bring in a lot of inputs. You may bring in.
I love the image that you use. Like when you look out your window for landscaping, you kind of want a picture perfect image, as opposed to not really knowing about and the systems and the toxicity
Right.
and how things relate to the health of the land and of course health of people, which are usually highly impacted. So another quick question: when you come to a project, suppose I called you to do consulting work. When you come in, what's your basic approach Do you do anything about to remediate what might have happened to the soil? Do you evaluate the soil? I mean, what are some of the tools that you have to bring into a realization the work that you do in a most ideal way?
Yeah, first thing is obviously soil testing, and we do a chemical test to find out, our organic matter, pH, cation exchanges, calcium magnesium ratios, all those different things. We'll do soil bioassays to find out if we have a fungal dominant or bacterial dominant soil. If there's anything we need to do to those soils to, as you mentioned, mitigate any issues we have. The other thing is when we do those soil tests, we're also looking at, instead of taking a square peg and putting it into a round hole, we're looking at that soil and those cultural areas, because there's any type of native plant to fit any cultural place on your property. You need to match the cultural aspect of the native plant species with the location on the property. For example, if you have a stand of oak trees and we walk onto a property and the client's been trying to grow grass under these oak trees for 15 years, and every year they're throwing grass seed down, trying to get grass to grow, it's never going to work. It's too shady. The pH is probably wrong. It's probably more acidic than the grass wants. But that being said, there are plenty of native species that want to grow under oak trees. So we take that aspect of the landscape, and instead of trying to change that soil dynamic, we work with the soil that's there and bring in plants that fit the cultural aspects of that location. And that goes with soil pH, shade, whether it's wet, dry, it doesn't matter the location. I'm just using it under oak trees, but it can be any type of location on that landscape. There's a native plant to suit every cultural aspect on that property.
Yeah, there's a term in organic land care called right plant, right place. So a lot of it is about how you where and so some people would like to think that organic land care or regenerative land care is all about expensive, fancy inputs. And there are some inputs, okay? There are some changes in products, but the reality of it is it's more cultural practices that change, like right plant, right place. We're not talking about products. We're talking about being smart about where you put something, and you put the right plant to begin with. You don't want to put something inappropriate for a space and you're always trying to compensate because you put something into the wrong system, right? It's about creating systems that work well with the location. And right plant, right place is one of the principles that I think implements both permaculture ideals, organic land care ideals, and regenerative ideals.
Fantastic. So, in the little bit of time that we have left, do either of you want to give some? I always like to, since the show is solutionaries and we focus on people like yourselves doing amazing work, what words of wisdom can you give people who might be inspired and also horrified about the reality of what might be lurking in their yard and what they're using for land maintenance, whether it's pesticides and herbicides or insecticides? What tips would you give someone to kind of start to, like, how can they take this opportunity of listening to you to start to make this transition themselves? What practical tips could they utilize?
Wow. So on a homestead is what you're saying, or on a home in a residential setting. Well, I mean, first off, if you wanted to become an advocate, of course, starting at home first is really a great idea. The principles that are used in land care in municipal spaces are the same that can be applied in residential for sure. I would compost. Personally, I think that's about the most right plant, right place. Even the master gardener programs, they don't teach organic land care and they don't teach regenerative land care for sure. But you could, if you were serious about it and wanted to learn more, you could take what's called the AOLCP with NOFA Connecticut. They teach organic land care standards to mostly landscapers, okay, professionals, but a homeowner could easily do it. I've done it. I did it 5 times and I'm no genius. And it's taught part-time over the course of a month. There is publications and websites you can go to learn more about doing it in your own yard. I like nontoxiccommunities.com. They are excellent. They do have tips for homeowners. I personally think the most effective thing I've done to mitigate my own circumstances on my homestead is to compost.
Amazing. Well, it's interesting hearing both of you talk. It's almost like people who go to medical school, they learn to be a doctor, but they don't learn anything about nutrition. They're missing the whole foundational piece that kind of affects the whole ecosystem. Of course, in many traditional indigenous cultures, we don't see the environment as something outside of ourselves, right? We're very much connected to it. So I really like what Richard say. I might quote you on that. When people think about landscaping, you want this picture perfect eye candy that you look out and everything looks so beautiful and manicured. But when you kind of look, behind the curtain, you actually start to see all the use of these kind of nefarious chemicals that not only impact the ecosystem and the watershed, but also affect our family and our family's health, like you were talking about, Rachel, with the case of the the Roundup contamination in Vallejo. So, Richard, do you want to offer any other ideas, and then we'll kind of do a wrap. Each of you can do kind of any closing thoughts. But this is really so much amazing information, and I hope people watching this get inspired. And before we go, I want to make sure people know how to get in touch with you, Richard, and also with Green Lifestyles Network with Rachel. So,
Yeah, sure.
any thoughts, Richard? What people can do, or anything to kind of help motivate them in this direction with the incredible work you're doing?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of podcasts that I'm the big fan of. One is called Native Plants, Healthy Planet podcast. They actually, the folks that do that are a local nursery here in New Jersey. They have a native plant nursery here in New Jersey. It's a good podcast. It's not necessarily for professionals. There's a lot of homeowner discussions and how homeowners can transition their properties. That's a good one. Backyard Ecology is another good podcast. And then books. There's 6 books, and hopefully I can remember them off the top of my head that really sort of changed the way I think about things. And one, like I mentioned already, was Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. The work of Dr. Doug Talmy, his first book, Bringing Nature Home, and his series of books. Richard Louve's The Nature Principle, and any books by Richard Louve. Wise Water. Can't remember the author, unfortunately. But those are a couple of things that definitely point people in the right direction on why and how things need to change and how to go about doing it. And if you are a homeowner trying to make changes on your property, start small and make sure you have a plan. Don't just go in and start ripping things out, because nature will put things back in you don't necessarily want. So if you can find somebody who is an organic land care practitioner or regenerative land care practitioner, that's your best bet. I know that we are few and far between, but they're out there. If you search for them, you can find them.
Well, I definitely want to thank you for being incredible solutionary, but also an innovator, and really kind of at the cutting edge of being such a game changer in the way that we look at nature, the way we look at land management, and the fact that you were involved in these other businesses in the past, and you kind of took that risk to, well, I'll make an inquiry and look into this, and you've made this incredible transition. So for me, really inspiring to hear the work that you're doing, especially in the commercial arena, and helping to consult and design and do the work that you do with people. It's really commendable and award worthy, I would say. So I really appreciate the time that we've had together today. If people would like more information from you, Richard, how would they contact you? I see that you do have some information on the screen, but if you could just tell us maybe a website, or if you have a business number, that would be helpful.
Sure. You could start with this website. Again, I'm exiting this business into the full-time consulting. But that McCoy Fine Gardens website is fine. Email is Richard R McCoy, sorry, R McCoy RLC. Yeah, R McCoy RLC at gmail.com. See, I am just getting started with this new email. So there you go.
Great. Well, kudos to you for keeping the Garden State green. And we've talked about so many things, the importance of native species, and awareness about horticulture, permaculture, or organic and regenerative land care and consulting. And of course, having Rachel Linden here with her depth of knowledge and her connections with Kathleen Halal and Beyond Toxics and non-toxic communities. And of course, Zen Honeycutt and Moms Across America, and just so many amazing people. I know that I want to also acknowledge Tora Rocha from the Pollinator Posse, who's been educating people about the importance of not destroying our pollinator populations, which is our key to food security. And sometimes people are a little bit disconnected about what we see and really the impact on our health. So even if we kind of approach this in a holistic health perspective, this isn't just about how things look. This is really about regenerating soil, regenerating ourselves, protecting our health, protecting our families. And really, if we can get this from coast to coast to kind of regenerate America with all the negative impacts that are happening around, again, land care, agriculture, and all of these different areas, it'd be a great way to have a healthier, happier population here in America. Any last thoughts, Rachel? And if you'd like to give people information about Green Lifestyles Network.
Sure, sure. You can find us online. We're greenlifestyles.org. You can reach me at restoreoursoil at Gmail. I'm Rachel Linden. And I would say I agree with you, Richard. Find a professional if you're working with a professional. An AOLCP, that's an accredited organic land care professional. They are listed nationally. You might get lucky and find one in a town near you. And that's from the NOFA Connecticut website. Just Google it, it'll come right up. You're looking for a professional who's been accredited and is local to you and is willing to take the time to come in and do a consult and maybe do some soil testing. Those are people that are paid, they're not volunteers, so keep that in mind. But sometimes going to a local nursery that carries native plants, they'll also have good tips and possibly some local support that you can draft from. But look for the Safe and Healthy Soils Act. That's a new topic. It's a new act that we're looking to have. We're using as a way to rally organizations behind the vision of carrying that forward at the federal level. I mean, we pay our taxes to have all these lands managed, and they're not managed the best way they could be. So, helping our representatives understand that's an option. And I've got to tell you, it's get traction. We're starting to have some real traction.
Well,
Anyhow, I just thank you for taking the time to bring us together. And
yeah, well, I'm really excited. I know we talked a little bit about a potential soil summit coming up. And again, I know regenerative ag is getting more known and more popular. I'm kind of setting my sights on Central Valley in California right now with some contacts I had. We won't talk about it used to be a lush wetlands with wildlife and vegetation, and now it's kind of a saline desert, and it's really just kind of been destroyed. And a lot of it is because we're not following what I call biomimicry, the intelligence of nature. We're kind of bringing in all of these man-made ideas and really having a devastating impact. And I'm really excited about the potential. I know Richard had mentioned very briefly about potentially in the future having a curriculum for the work he does, because I hope this broadcast inspires other people or professionals to get triggered a little bit about, wow, I didn't realize I'm poisoning myself and my community, and to start to make the transition into regenerative. And of course, thank you so much for helping me understand the difference between organic land management and regenerative land consulting. So thank you both of you for your time. I'm going to go shovel snow from the driveway here, and have a great weekend and a great Thanksgiving. And I look forward to our potential soil summit in 2026.
sounds good. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you. Take care.